Welcome back to BIZ First in Focus. Doctor, last year the Colombo Stock Exchange was one of the best performing markets in the world. However, today it has tumbled over weeks. I want to know, Doctor, what is the reason behind this?
Oh, this is a big story. As in other areas of economic policy, this also somewhat this boom in the stock market, so to speak, immediately after the war until sort of late last year, was a state-driven kind of thing. I mean, if you look at partly state-driven, there was of course private sector interest as well, both domestic and international. Partly why I'm saying why state-driven is also, if you look at government itself has been purchasing stocks and shares in financial institutions, banks like Commercial Bank, International Bank, thereby having influence in the board of those institutions. You may be aware that Commercial Bank, the government appointed a former military person in the board of directors. HNB, International Bank, there was the chairperson of the HNB is the former deputy governor of the central bank, again government sort of sponsored or pushed appointee. So there have been government involvement, quite a considerable or substantial government involvement in propping up the stock market as well. But of course the private sector also was quite upbeat in the early, immediately after the war. Of course,
Doctor, what is the reason behind this? Is market manipulation, insider trading, that deals with all this, the boom that we saw, the sudden surge that we saw in the Colombo stock market?
Yeah, I mean, the results have come out now. You know, some people were even showing red cards last year or even before that. A lot of things are going wrong. You know. But nobody or not many people took notice of it, and now all of a sudden you have and this is what happens when government tries to unduly influence or involve in activities of the stock market.
Interest rates, Doctor, how does this reflect on the Colombo stock market? We saw the manner in which interest rates have been taken up by the central bank over the years. I want to know, how does this reflect on the Colombo stock market as far as investing is concerned?
Yeah, interest rates are high. Then the issue is the returns has to also be higher. Then for any person who has got some capital, there's option to invest in secure fixed deposits or term deposits, or even normal savings account in a financial institution, or buy up stocks and shares in the capital market. You see. So when the interest rates are higher due to policy decisions made by the central bank, the returns on investment in stocks and shares have to be higher than what they would get in much more secure, because as you know, stock market investment is not guaranteed, whereas
dragging away our attention, Doctor, to the IMF, a final tranche that would be granted to Sri Lanka. The committee is due to arrive in the island next week. Does this mean the people will have to tighten their belts further?
Certainly. I mean, certainly. In any kind of economic downturn, it's ultimately the ordinary people who bear the brunt of the. Relatively richer people can cope with this kind of boom and bust kind of economic cycles, but average person or below average persons are the ones who will pay up. So the declining growth rate and continuing fragile situation of the external balances of the government, rupees depreciation, etc., everything is definitely going to affect, even though it may not be reflected in the official inflation rates, but on day-to-day livelihood basis, people have to bear the brunt of. It is time for the people to ask from the government or the rulers or the policymakers to take action and to be open with them about their policy stances and their processes and their involvement in kind of issues which are coming up in the stock market. and be open and transparent with the people, and if they have done anything wrong, to even apologize. Nothing wrong for politicians.
Media reports suggest, Doctor, that the government is looking at obtaining another loan, a $500 million loan from the IMF, apart from the final tranche.
Yes.
Initially, the government said that they do not want the money lent by the IMF. However, things have changed over the last few months or so. So where would the government really utilize this money, Doctor, in your opinion?
It's a very good question. Times are hard, though, so they go back onwards. If you remember, the first, this government has been borrowing a lot on the private international capital market since 2007. The first sovereign bond for 500 million was issued in October 2007. Before the sovereign bond, when the sovereign bond there was a call for investors in this 500 million sovereign bond. The reason given by the central bank and the Ministry of Finance is that to fund the so-called big, huge infrastructure projects in the pipeline, they need finances. And I still have the statements from the Finance Ministry and the central bank. Immediately after the sovereign bonds were sold and bought up by international and local investors, it was openly claimed by the Ministry of Finance that that money has been utilized to retire higher interest paying government debt. Similarly, I have also, like you, I have also read that there is some fresh initiative to get additional $500 million US from the IMF on top of the standby agreement which they had in 2009-10 period. This, to my understanding, is, as I mentioned, the first sovereign bond for 500 million was issued in October 2007, which matures later this year, in 2012. So there's a huge repayment due for the government. Although they may not say or claim at the moment that borrowing is for the repayment of that sovereign bond, best of my understanding, it is primarily and solely for that purpose.
My final question to you is, Doctor, what is the message you have for the policy makers of this island in terms of the country's economy, the way forward?
Right, this is a big issue. This is not necessarily an economic issue, this is a political issue as well. I mean, you would have heard that the Secretary of the Treasury recently, while launching the annual report of the Ministry of Finance, have been quite terse in certain issues, especially on state-owned enterprises. I mean, government's top bureaucrats themselves are at least opening up their mouth, the reality of the situation. The perpetually loss-making state-owned enterprises cannot go on like this. And they brought in a legislation so-called to nationalize or for the state to take over underperforming or underutilization of capacity businesses or companies. But if you apply that principle to state-owned enterprises, a lot of things have to be really privatized. I mean, there is no indication of any possibility of reform or restructuring of state-owned enterprises. Public debt is rising mainly because of perpetually loss-making state-owned enterprises, whether it's Ceylon Electricity Board or Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. Whatever the price hikes which came out early this year due to IMF pressure, it was too late. It needed to be done long ago. So, its politicization of the economic policy making is a critical issue. I mean, this has gone. This has been done under different regimes since independence. This is not something new happening now. But it is time now. We are in a different kind. Sri Lanka is in a different kind of context after a prolonged war. There is political stability. There's a strong government, at least in parliament. There should have been bold policy decisions undertaken in the past 3 years. Always is easy to take hard or unpopular policy decisions soon after elections, before the next election comes. It's very difficult to take very unpopular decisions closer to any elections. So it should have been undertaken maybe last year before, but nevertheless not too late. At least this year they have to act on reforming the state-owned enterprises, reducing public debt, reducing the public administration itself, including the defense forces. And other critical thing is our education system has to be reformed to to create a labor force, create human resources and human capital that is appropriate for a middle-income country like Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us right now on this festival. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
talking to you this evening.